So good morning, everyone. Hello, my name is Lacey Clem, and I'm the Northwest Regional Coordinator from the Indiana State Library's Professional Development Office. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We are pleased to have Bryann Gibson, Senior Outreach and WorkOne System Liaison, with us today to give us a session about Wow, WorkOne Can Help You. I'd like to start off the webinar with a few announcements. To register for other webinars and trainings available from the Professional Development Office, please see the Indiana State Library's events calendar, which can be found on our website at library.in.gov under Services for Libraries. For a full list of our current in-person training menu, please see our continuing education website. If there is a global sound issue during the webinar, we will announce it in the chat box. If you are unable to resolve the sound issue you are experiencing, we are recording this session and you can watch it offline after the meeting has ended. Again, if there is a global sound issue, we will make an announcement in the chat box. Also, make sure to set your chat to everyone in the chat drop-down menu so we can see your comments and questions. There will be time at the end for answering those questions. Today's webinar will be archived and available on the Indiana State Library's Archive Trainings page after it has been transcribed. And this session is worth 1 LEU. I will be sending out certificates and a link to this presentation later this week or early next week, since we are heading into a holiday. Without any further ado, I will now turn the presentation over to Bryann.
Thank you, Lacey. Good morning, everybody. As Lacey mentioned, my name is Bryann Gibson, and I'm the Senior Outreach and WorkOne System Liaison for Region 1 of the WorkOne employment system in Indiana. So that would be the 7 counties in the northwest corner, Lake Porter, LaPorte, Stark, Newton, Pulaski, Jasper, and in that zone, we operate 9 offices. So I've been in the WorkOne system a little over 20 years. November was 20 years. And so obviously I'm happy to be here today and talk about what we do, just so that, one, we can have clarity about what WorkOne does, but also to our purpose as professionals, work better together to serve our kind of shared clientele. So this presentation, we call it Wow, How WorkOne Can Help. And the presentation is fairly short in terms of the actual PowerPoint, but I can elaborate on any points and talk in depth on any things you guys may be wondering about. We typically do this in brief public settings, kind of out in the community. Also, we'll do it in the office sometimes when there are certain programs related to unemployment, like RICEA, where filers will, have interacted with our system, but just really to get that unemployment benefit. And so we have to kind of catch them in that moment and still make the value conversation about the rest of the things WorkOne does and how they really could be helped by it. So it's kind of history on the title. Okay. So I'll just be talking about the WorkOne no-cost services, skill training programs, and then the kind of in-depth specifics of those no-cost services. So, everything we do in some form, I guess, is either a job seeker and or an employer service, but there are specific elements to how we help clients. So that's what I'll go through. And then, of course, any questions or concerns. So the entire time I've been in the system, the big battle has been to reframe, re-educate, and really just help people get the understanding of really what WorkOne is about. Coming from, Northwest Indiana, I've lived here all my life, beyond and on top of my work, interaction, but living here all our lives. And it's probably familiar to a bunch of us, when you live somewhere, you kind of understand the community's perception of an agency system or service, because you've been on that side too. And so we've been fighting forever because the WorkOne moniker to the average resident, is really, the unemployment office. And so the first hill we kind of have to climb is really getting people to understand that we're much more than that. Of course, people will interact with WorkOne to file their unemployment, but we are so much more than the unemployment office. And really in today's era, it's a totally mismatched association. So years ago, when I was new, of course, there was unemployment representatives in the offices. People would come in physically to file. There were cards people dropped off weekly to show their job search activities. There were cards we gave folks to show that they matched to certain jobs that were in the system. So it was a little more understandable how the mixed branding, if you will, could come about. But in today's environment, it's really kind of perplexing because most unemployment activities people do are online. So they're doing that from home or they're doing it from their devices. We don't have any reps in the offices who work the unemployment program. All we really have is our phones that can connect people to Indianapolis to talk about the specifics of their claim. And then, of course, the public computers to, for them to do that online filing if they don't have that access on their own. So with every human in the building having some responsibility with re-employment, finding the next job, upskilling, connecting to occupational skills training, it is a little weird to have still that embedded perception of being the unemployment office. But, it is there and we continue to fight against it. Check the chat. Okay. Okay. So the primary no-cost service that from a value standpoint that to a lot of our residents is that we offer occupational skills training in demand occupations. And we can pay up to $5,500 in a program year for someone to get that training. And so that is a gigantic service or benefit to folks because, as many of us know, the unemployment market over the last several years, as things evolve in the economy, that trickle down effect to the worker. So a lot of times, I remember when I was coming in, there was a big shakeup in the steel industry up here, and there was consolidation that really left about 10 or 12, about 8 to 10 smaller mills really consolidated in 2 big ones. And so just as an example, that's a situation where the workers affected are not really just looking at trying to find some open job openings and apply somewhere else, but in many cases, really a reflective inward look on what am I doing, what's out there for me, and what's a good thing to get into. So a lot of times gaining new skills, retraining, credentialing in some new occupation might be necessary. And so to have people dealing with that kind of weighty issue and not aware that there is a potential avenue for them to help get that, without having to go into their own finances or different forms of credit to get it, that is a big game changer in a lot of situations. So we do definitely try to make known that occupational skills training is available. The limit is, $5,500 in a year. Now, when I talk about training, it falls in a few different categories, and feel free to unmute and pause me or ask a question, about this. This is kind of for everybody's real development and ability to not only know what we do, but also, connect folks to it if needed. So don't, sit on a question for the interest of propriety or anything like that. So when I say training, WorkOne looks at training in a few different ways that kind of fall in different categories. So the first one is occupational skills training. And so this is short-term training. And short-term for our purposes is pretty much 5 months, 4 months or less. And short-term training in a demand occupation. And demand occupation really just means that now I know I'm talking to people who may be throughout the state, but in each area of the state, there's a kind of unique local job market. And it's why in Indiana, the state has chosen to bid career services out to local providers in each of the 12 regions. So when we say demand occupation, it just means that there are open jobs in the local area that you would be able to get into in this training or this field or occupation. So that occupational skills training, the reason it has to be short term 4 or 5 months. I'm trying to think through training offerings I've seen over the years. About the longest one has been about 16 weeks, roughly. So about 4 months. But the reason it's supposed to be short term in nature is that we're, of course, under the Department of Labor. And so the Department of Labor's interest as it relates to training and education is always about a quick connection back to the job market. Nothing against long-term education. It's one of the greatest things most of us have experienced as individuals as we grow. But so much long-term education is already set up to be handled through the Department of Education. So why are you training under Department of Labor? Well, it's the section of education that is employment related, quick, and helps people get back to work. And we all know the benefits, of having more people working. So we offer that to clients. Also, adult college completion. Adult college completion is really a lot like occupational skills training, but it's just a dip of the toe into kind of education's space. So like I said, Department of Education typically takes care of long-term education, but we will frequently come across people in the workforce development system who have had prior college interaction, but may not have completed or may have been kind of close to a degree. And so there have been cases where it doesn't really make sense to start a new training from scratch that may not even be in what we're studying when you're that close. So adult college completion is really just kind of saying we also can cover college programs that fit onto what I was saying about short-term and demand-driven. So you might be in a nursing program through a traditional university, but because that occupation is in demand locally, and because you're only needing maybe 6 credits, 2 classes, something like that, that can be finished in that kind of same short-term construct. And so for those purposes, we are able to help. On the job training is a little different. And so on the job training is where we are working with a job seeker who's looking for a position that they might not be fully qualified for, not 100%, but pretty close. And so in those situations, we are able to, or we've been able to, it is a case by case basis, but we've been able to work with the company that they're trying to get employment at and broker an arrangement where the employer will agree to train them on the pieces that they are missing, the things that that were leaving them short of being 100% qualified. And the worker, of course, will work, learn, take the training, but also be doing the job. And then we might pay a portion of their wage during that training period. But the caveat is that once they've completed the training, the employer agrees by contract to hire them as a full-time employee. We're not in the middle, no wage, sharing, anything like that. Just take them in and move on into the future with them as an employee. So it's a really wonderful benefit when we're able to make it work, because that job seeker really shouldn't lose out on an opportunity when they are so close or pretty close to the qualifications. But we also understand why an employer might not want to pay the full wage that they're paying everyone else to an employee who's not quite as skilled or not quite as productive in that early phase. So if you agree to teach and help scale them up to where they need to be, we will participate during that period and help relieve some of your financial burden. But once they've learned it, we'll step out and you guys move forward as employer and employee. And then work experience is a very similar to on-the-job training, but it is if you take away the promise to employ the person at the end of the training. So work experience is very popular when we work with young adults, youth, and also adults who may have been out of work for some extended period of time. It's an opportunity for them to get a look at the workplace that they're interested in, learn skills related to that position. For the younger people and youth, it's an opportunity to, kind of get references and learn, meet people and network and help do some of those side things that are a little more intangible that also kind of fold into having a prosperous career. Okay, so the categories that of people that we help is really adds up to everybody. So we help anyone in Indiana who is looking for employment. So that's one of the misnomers or misunderstandings as well. On top of the unemployment piece, the other assumption people will tend to make is that you need to be unemployed for WorkOne to help you. That's not true. We help anyone who is looking for their next position. So current status doesn't matter. If you're working, fine. Not working, student, all of those categories, that's fine. Just as long as you're looking for the next job, then WorkOne can assist. Let me pause real quick. I do see a question, and it's probably related to something I recently said. So why should I keep talking? Good questions. Good questions, Ms. Kistler. Okay, so first question was, how do you help with college credits? Do you provide equivalency tests or classes? So for the training portion, that prior slide that just talked about all types of trainings, it's a very good question. We don't directly facilitate any training. We provide funding assistance to existing training providers in the area. So if it's a college completion, it would be existing schools, Ivy Tech is primary, University of St. Francis, very popular. And then it's in terms of the occupational skills training providers, there are all kind of places locally who do, maybe the CNA training themselves, and they're the experts. So we provide the funding assistance where a client could get the training and not have to pay. And then we also are able to provide supportive services that cover things like scrubs and wristwatches, stopwatch and steel toe boots and things like that. We're also able to provide supportive services that cover things like gas cards and gas assistance, for the first few weeks of work in many cases, because how it is. I mean, there's looking for work. Oh, I got a job. Then there's this other period of, but when do I get a check? And let's see, equivalency tests or classes. If I could put a pin in that, I'll talk about that as well, because we do a lot of testing, but not really directly related to training. And I say that because we have adult education, high school completion within the WorkOne system. So of course there's testing involved both at the assessment, pre-test, the progress, post-test level, and then the credentialing, licensing test level. So we do a lot of testing, but the majority of it is either adult ed based or tied to employers. And so I'll talk about that in a second.
Bryann, there's also a couple questions in the chat.
Yeah, I'm looking at those now too.
Okay.
Somebody wants to change job trajectory but doesn't know what they want, use our services. Okay, so Charlotte, the way a person would do that, I would say that's our prime client. That person would just need to contact the WorkOne. What would happen is, and they could walk in, they could call in, whatever. Actually, in Northwest Indiana, we have our own scheduling system that we purchased several years ago that people can go onto our portal, self-schedule appointments. But what a person would do is contact WorkOne, they'd meet with a career advisor. And part of what that career advisor would be doing is career exploration, because if they do want to get into something, different, many times, I like just thinking of myself, like, I'll know I need to be doing something different, but I don't know what. I just know this isn't it, right? So there may be some exploration around what's growing, what are typical wages, what's projected job openings. So, of course, workforce development, works on two sides. So you've got placement and interaction of jobs and employers, but then you've got this kind of long-term economic development trajectory that supports the market anyway. So there would be a bunch of, in this case, sounds like a lot of career exploration to maybe target what's interesting or what's good. We have all kinds of tools that do personal assessments where people talk about, just things they like to do, both work related and not, personal features, values around work. And so a lot of those things point at careers. And then from then, of course, it would be kind of case management based conversation on the pros and cons, and then looking at, any jobs that might fit into that client's desire or set of needs or goals, for the next company. Would occupational skills training include driver's education for adults who've never had a license? A good one. That wouldn't count under occupational skills training. The most popular driving occupational skills training, of course, is CDL. Someone who did not have a license, we would be able to assist with that. It would probably fall under supportive services. And the reason I'm pausing is I'm actually thinking through like the steps on how we would quantify it, right? So it probably would involve finding a position that person is qualified for, interested in, where driving is a requirement, so that we could isolate driving as the only thing keeping them from getting that job. Then we might be able to address maybe not something like a driver's ed class, but the test and the fees to get a license under supportive services. Mr. Parker says, I'm assuming the WorkOne can also be used by someone who already has a job and would like to look for a second job. That is correct. Yep. Okay, so Diane, I hope I answered your driving related question too in my response. Okay. Okay. And this is good. This is what I want. So what comes to your mind, put it in the chat or interrupt and ask. So we help everybody, but we do recognize that there are differences in, certain factors that might put us in categories. So we do have staff that have specialty in each of these sub portions of everybody, right? So of course we help, adults with no, special extra feature, just a regular person, who's over 18, look for work. We have veteran staff through the JVSG, Jobs for Veterans State Grant, and they are able to work with veterans, and any of our staff can work with veterans and do, but we also keep veteran staff to work with ideally the 20% of veterans who have the most serious, what they call SBEs, or significant barriers to employment. And because, as many of us are familiar with, there's the job element. Sometimes if you've got military service in your background, you need applying your skills, translating skills out of military occupational specialties into regular workforce language. So some of those kind of things that are much more connected to the military and proper, veteran staff is already familiar with those. Then they're also able to address all of those other things that come potentially with military service, because one, they've been through it themselves. So counseling, connection to other services, resources, federal benefits for veterans that may not have been advertised or explained to them as they exited the military, post-traumatic stress, counseling, substance abuse issues. Our vet staff attend the regional vet courts because there's some diversion programs in different localities to take some offenses. And if the person has served our country, then, try to create a pathway to give them a second chance and not be as punitive. So our veterans support all of those kind of vet specific activities, but also bring in, that they are an employment profession. Seniors, youth, and then a reentry. Now, youth for WorkOne purposes is our young people ages 16 to 24. Even though, of course, 18 to 24, someone is also technically an adult. And the idea behind that is that zone of 18 to 24, you are an adult, but you also have many features still kind of a youth, especially as it relates to employment. So the youth program serves up to age 24, because you could still be 24 and not have gotten your first job. And not even in a negative sense. I mean, you could have gone through high school, achieved, done well, gone to college, but here you are emerging 22, 23 years old going, okay, now what do I do about finding a job? And then reentry, we have staff that work with second chance citizens and work with our business service team to find and interact with companies that are second chance friendly and make those connections quicker, and without the client having to weed through so many of the other positions that might hold their background hold that against them, and it could actually, discourage some of their efforts toward job search. So the reentry specialist, a lot like the vet, just takes the special factors of what you've been through and incorporates them into the same employment activities you need to do to sustain your life as everybody else. Okay. So as you see, and I'm not running through these, but there's no real difference in the menu of services we offer. So like I was just saying, it's really about that specialization, understanding, and attention when it comes to these categories. But the service menu, anyone who comes to WorkOne can get all of the same thing. So career counseling and planning, that case management, that follow along feature, occupational skills preparation, training, and the funding. And so sometimes the preparation is a bigger word than even the training, some of us might know. I know me, there are things I know, but I haven't used in probably 20, 30 years, that before I went into school or a program or something, I might need to spend some time, working with fractions again, whatever. So we offer that. Job search skills, abilities, workshops. And so we have workshop offerings that run in person and virtually on set schedules. We also do them out in the community per request. And those cover all of the, kind of elements of job search, resume development, interviewing, cover letters, all of those pieces, but also a lot of the human and soft skill related competencies that lend themselves to keeping a job and hopefully moving up over time. Okay. So as you see, as I was talking about with veterans, we reinforce that they do get priority of service. So that means that if there was a competition for a limited amount of service or funding, then the vet status would push them ahead to get it. Okay. And then we also work with the CSEP, or Senior Community Service Employment Program. And that's a federal program that works with people 55 and over. And it is a mesh of them working, but also learning and acquiring or sharpening skills that they need for jobs. So what will happen is a job seeker will become a client of this CSEP program, and then CSEP will place them at different host agencies. And then while they're at that host agency, they're both working or getting a look at and learning what the agency does, but also taking advantage of being in that space to sharpen up whatever that they and CSEP have kind of identified they want to learn for their future. So CSEP is a partner. I mean, they're a lot like WorkOne in that their whole goal is to just get people jobs, but they're focused on seniors or older workers. And so in most cases, we become the host agency. The CSEP workers work with us. And then we also, all those services I was talking about, case managing, connecting them to training, we're doing that with them also while they're in here with us, working in the office and working the front desk, getting sharper with the internet, getting familiar with Word, learning some of the spreadsheet management functions in Excel and things like that. Okay. So talked about youth. Right, so it's reentry. I don't like the term felon friendly. So, it's in the presentation, but I just feel like they're second chance citizens. And I've gotten second chances on a number of things in my life. It's just, it just doesn't have to do with criminal interaction. So I think that that is a much better way for us to integrate how we're serving them, because really the services and the needs that they have are just like everybody else. Okay. So the main feature of why someone would work with WorkOne, I've been asked that before. It's like, well, why would I work with WorkOne? There are all these job search sites and services. I mean, what is the value add of having an employment office or system? And it is career advising. So career advisors serve as, of course, the coach. My favorite phrase is that they are really the individual's guide through the WorkOne system, because it is so many pieces and services and all of these, things that if you are a worker with a life and you're just trying to find your next job, just trying to move forward, I mean, it's confusing, it's overwhelming. Job searching by nature is not pleasant. Who does that type of thing voluntarily? I think ideally, most people would get one job, love it, grow with them and grow to accommodate them however they grow and change, and never have to, find another job again. If I need more money, great job, pay me more money. I think most people would, in a perfect world, like that. So I think job searching by nature is unpleasant, unfamiliar, especially the longer a person has been attached to their prior job before they had to start looking. They're more theoretically disconnected from everything that's been happening in job searching. Who studies this stuff while, once again, you have your life going? So right at the point where I'm most confused, the most things are coming at me, and I'm in the most need, I find myself a lot of times with the least amount of information. So career advising becomes critical, because it can kind of clear the fog, help them, even if I know where I want to be and the goal, I see it. Having someone help me plot what are the logical steps that'll get me there is helpful. And then they're able to individualize and customize the things that we have in our service menu so that they fit the needs of the actual person in front of. Career advisors also, of course, are the ones who advocate for the client within the system. So, making requests for funding to send them to training, requesting supportive services, making connections to the business service team around a certain job opening, and really explaining the value of the client and why they deserve that opportunity. So that's the main benefit. And then the other benefit I always tell people of why would they work with WorkOne is because WorkOne can connect you with jobs that are not available on some of these other sites. So, for example, if you see something on Indeed and you come into WorkOne, WorkOne probably can show you that same job because it's in our system as well, right? All of these job search engines are aggregators. So they're scraping the web from each other and pulling stuff that's out there. That's why a lot of the same jobs show up in pretty much all of them. But WorkOne will also be able to show you jobs that may not be posted anywhere, because the business service team, humans, are working those jobs or positions or openings locally. They're visiting those companies. They're talking back and forth with the HR people or the different officials who are handling, hiring at those places, and then they are loading those jobs into Indiana Career Connect, which is our job search system. So when you're in Indiana Career Connect, you'll see stuff that you probably saw on Indeed and Monster and all of that too. But then you'll see local positions that are being sourced by humans. You cannot go to those other sites and see those jobs because they are internal. Let's see. Good question, Ginger. She said, is WorkOne nationwide, found in all states? Yes and no. So a WorkOne type system exists everywhere in the country. We are under Department of Labor. And so there is a state-run job search system in every state of the country. It is not called WorkOne in anywhere but Indiana. WorkOne is Indiana's brand name for it. If you step over in Illinois, they have the same system. It provides the same services because they're federally created and mandated, but they're run through the Illinois Department of Employment Security. So what they decide to maybe name their building or websites, could be something different, obviously, than WorkOne. But the services and the system are available everywhere in America. The law, the current law, because the law keeps needing to be reauthorized. So the current law, if anybody's ever just trying to look up like where the system comes from, is the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. So it's congressional legislation, but it's our current law, and that law succeeded the Workforce Investment Act, which was the law for that era, which succeeded the Job Training Partnership Act, JTPA, some people maybe have heard of before. And then, of course, JTPA succeeded CETA, which was, I'm back around the late 80s now. CETA is the Comprehensive Employment and Training Act. And all of them succeed the Manpower Act, which kind of created job training in America. Federal job training. All right, making sure I'm good. Okay, no other questions. Okay, so when I mentioned workshops, this workshop, of course, is one we do for clients so that they can know, number one, the services that are even available, because I could have been driving past that place every day going, that's the unemployment office. That must be all they do, right? So the WOW presentation is a workshop. We do What About My Resume, which is a general session on resume development that we then can refer a person afterward into one-on-one resume assistance where they can get the specific kind of critique on their document. Today's interview, once again, that can be followed by an referral into mock interviewing. There's a session on job search strategies, which for some people it is a fairly new thing. Like I was saying earlier, there's been a long time since I've had to search before this whole internet era and posting and multi-factor authentications. I mean, that is its own bear for a lot of people. People throw their hands up and say, why can't I just drive there and hand them my resume or go get an application? And then bouncing back from job loss. And so that session is really in recognition that we do interact with people who are recently unemployed. And there may be factors that we need to work with them on and address and help see them through before the next job really can materialize in the horizon of their mind, because job loss could have been traumatic and all of those other things that come with that. My first 8.5 years or so, I was a career advisor in different ways with youth and with adults and different things. And I would really take it personal with some clients because I'd be giving them what I thought was great advice. I mean, do this, do this, do this, do this. And they would say, oh, yeah. And then I talked to them later and they hadn't done any of it. And I mean, it seemed personal. Like, these phrases you start saying, they don't want to work, or they won't do what they're say. They don't take advice. After a while, it kind of dawned that they're just not hearing you yet. And in the same way, I don't hear people when something traumatic happens in my life, right? So that workshop is helpful for some folks. So I just talked to you about WorkOne, the system, which is the value is in using the system, the people, services, and the way that they can come together to change your life. But we also, WorkOne is a building, right? So people can just choose to use the building. And that is accessing our computers, internet, technology, printing, faxing, community resources. People come in and need to know things or want to know things. that may have nothing in, but our staff, and through our partner network can food assistance, for example, food banks, childcare. How do I apply for Healthy Indiana plan? Because with losing my job, see, there was health insurance may have gone away. So we're able to make referrals through our partner network for any other wraparound services that fall outside of employment. And then, of course, offer people the ability to use our location and our infrastructure for self-directed activities. And we just let them know we're available to help. Okay. So when I talk to the public, I always tell them, they say, well, how do you make the most of WorkOne or make the most of your time? Work with that career advisor and not just meet with one, but get enrolled. And so for us, enrolled just means you are an actual WorkOne client and somebody in the system has, as a part of their job performance, the responsibility to help you find a job. Now, you count in our performance and numbers. And if you don't find a job, or the longer it takes, someone in there is having to answer for it. It's not just I'm using the location. So higher level of engagement. Of course, keep appointments, more so just communicate, rescheduling other things that may pop up. Use any of the available workshops, ask questions, and always say more than ask questions. Just advocate for yourself in a system designed to help you, in a system filled with people who are there to help. Your advocacy for your needs is really the activator that makes people go, okay, let's try the next thing. And eventually we get there. All right. And so, of course, the equal opportunity slide that I and probably all of us do when we communicate with the public. So I touched on our no-cost services, talked a bit about training, job seeker services, the value and importance of career advising, went through the most common workshops, mentioned resources, and really how it all adds up to help Indiana residents get the next job. All right, let me check the chat. Yes, we do. We have flyers, brochures, definitely. And I'm going to kill this screen share.
Bryann, I think some libraries don't realize that WorkOne will also come to their library and do workshops and things like that. I know the previous library I used to work in, we had WorkOne come in quite a bit and do workshops on resumes and all kinds of fun stuff. So I know that I didn't realize that for the longest time, because you do get kind of in the mindset, oh, WorkOne helps with unemployment. And that was one of the biggest battles we also had too, is that trying to get people to realize that WorkOne is just not, they don't just handle unemployment.
Yeah. People don't know about this, obviously about the services and things, but yeah, Lacey, we take the services out. So my team is outreach, and so we do workshops at community events, community locations, nonprofits, churches, libraries, and moving forward, that's one of my big goals, is to kind of better formalize and structure our relationship with local libraries, because a lot of data is showing that the average person who needs help, job seekers and things, are really going to their church and library primarily, because so much is online. So people are kind of taking themselves to the nearest access point for them to the technology to get online, and then trying to do the rest of the stuff there. So we need to get more of the expertise on site to those places. I'd love to be able to locate staff in the local libraries on some kind of rotation, and actually have career advisors in there too.
Yeah, because I know that whoever I worked with in the past, they, would even come and we'd set up a table for them to have the resources out, and then patrons could come up to the table and ask about WorkOne, and that was always very beneficial as well, that you guys are willing to come out and do that for the communities.
Oh yeah. I don't know how much you guys have seen in the library system, but this situation since COVID, I mean, it's a different behavior in people in me, like at home. Like I'm different. The house and the job like have melded, and we've been trying to figure out, because foot traffic, people aren't walking in building doors as much, even though people need to work. So it's where are they accessing it? We know a lot of stuff's happening at home, but libraries and churches really are where people's traffic has been redirected to. And so as a system, we're going to be even more outreach focused to say, hey, let's just be there, because you can't help people if you can't find them.
Yeah, libraries definitely get you patrons who come in that need information. They're usually like, well, they told me to come to the library.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, okay, well, we'll try to help you in the best way possible, but we're not always equipped to be able to help with everything that they need, especially since the pandemic. And
Mm-hmm.
but having these resources is always, it's just invaluable, especially in the climate that we're in. So
Yeah. So let me check the Q&A. Looks like a new one came in. I was just going to ask if WorkOne does outreach. We have many people who cannot get to our WorkOne office because of transportation issues. It's 20 to 30 miles away. A lot of our unemployed have not transportation. How can we solve this problem? Yeah. Excuse me. In Region 1, we definitely do outreach. We have a full team, and it's a regional commitment. I can't speak to every region of the state, so I don't know exactly where you're at, Janice, but it seems like there should really be some mechanism for people for that regional WorkOne system to come out to you guys and do outreach. Morgan County. Okay, so Morgan County would be like Martinsville. I went to school in Bloomington, and I remember Morgan County. It's right before Monroe. So I think that's Mooresville, Martinsville. I think if you contact the service provider in that region, they're doing outreach down there. Gotcha. Okay. And now I would say, Janice, if there's something, I mean, if there's a specific need you have, you can actually send it to us. And if it's virtual, it might be something we can assist with. But if it's a little more in depth and would affect performance, our regional vice president, who is a peer, obviously, of the person who would be running your area, could take that request to him, and things have a way of getting done when you kind of start them up high enough. So I could suggest that as well. Any other questions? Okay. Well, I touched on what WorkOne really does. If there is any questions about process or any of that, feel free to ask them.
there looks like there's one more question in the Q&A. Are there financial requirements in order to get enrolled in WorkOne, or is it available to any Indiana resident?
Good question. Okay. So to get help through WorkOne, there are no financial requirements. Career services are available to everyone. That is part of that federal law that created the programs. So it's called universal access. Anybody has a right to get helped with getting help. There are, however, financial kind of requirements to getting training funding. Now, in our area, we've devised a way to screen most people in who want training funding. So instead of going through the normal income chart that is kind of tied to the poverty level, we got the state to accept our use of the MIT wage calculator a year ago, well, a year and a half ago. And the MIT wage calculator does income on a little wider concept, not just raw numbers, this household, this many people, this much money equals poverty. It incorporates a lot of everyday factors. And so as a result, it sets much higher income need levels for each household size, which means most people we're sitting with now are screened in. They're under the requirement to get the financing. That, hope I ain't confused anybody. So for example, let's say that on my normal 70% LLSIL chart, the income chart we used to use, I might look at a household of 3 and I might see $21,000. And I'm going, oh my goodness, right? Now there are plenty of people we'd still be able to help, because if you lost your job 2 months ago, you might have been earning much more than the 21,000 a year. But if you've lost your job 2 months, 3 months, 4 months ago, see, I got a good zone of the capture period with 0. So when you did have wages, now when I'm looking at your last 6 months, you might be under. But that was too hit or miss, person to person, right? What if you came to me and you just lost your job? You got 6 full months of wages to show for the last 6 months. Do I tell you come back in 3 months when we can make some numbers work? You know, that's not really customer friendly from a life perspective, right? So this MIT approach might look at that same household and go, nah, a household of 3, but only 1 working adult in this area of the country with inflation and blah, blah, blah. That real number is 40,000. And so I'd much rather use a chart with that when most people I meet are not gonna, be over that. So it's a way for us to screen in, help more people, and pretty much, stay within the law, stay within the rules, but get as many people training assistants who need it. Is the best way to make contact with WorkOne the 1-877 number or the local number for our area? I would say use the local number for your area. And WorkOne, each region has its own WorkOne portal. But if you, it's a little cumbersome trying to remember all the little differences. So for example, in Northwest Indiana, we are www.go-to-workonenw.com. NW for Northwest, right? Over in South Bend, they might be workoneeast.com. Employee ND and folks in Marion County and employee ND and WorkOne ND, right? So all these sub names. If you just go to workone.com with nothing else in it, you'll get the state WorkOne page, which will then let you just pick whichever region you're trying to connect with.
Well, thank you so much, Bryann, for coming on and doing this presentation for us, because it was really wonderful information. If there's any follow-up questions that anybody has later on, if you email me after I've sent out the slides, I can always get them to Bryann and then get them, back to whoever asked.
Definitely.
But we appreciate your time and your expertise, because you can tell that you've been in this job for a while and, and you know what you're talking about, so that's always lovely.
Thanks for having me, Lacey. Lacey mentioned you were in East Chicago, right?
Correct, yes.
Yeah. Back when we had an EC office, I used to do the youth program over there many moons ago. So it was great to come on. Anything else you need, the questions answered, forward them to me. And so if you need to talk about anything else, anybody on the call, feel free to reach me. I will drop my email in the chat. well, right now, because it's going to end soon. Okay. All right. So my email's in the chat. If you need to, anybody contact me for any reason afterward, feel free to do so. Thank you guys for having me on. Thanks, Lacey. Thank you, Lisa. And I hope everybody has a wonderful day and do your great work.
And I hope everyone has a lovely holiday.